तारीख एक सदा गुनगुनाती सदा अश्कार होती हुई एक किताब है। ये ऐतिहासिक कहानी कौन सुनाता है, इससे ज़ाहिर होता है कि क्या बताया जा रहा है। स्कूल की किताबों में जिसकी कहानी लिखी गई है उससे तय होता है कि एक कौम अपने आप को किस नज़रिए से देखता है, और ये भी पता चलता है कि क्या पीछे छूट गया है या क्या पसमानदा हो गया है। आज हम यूनुस लसानिया से बात करेंगे, जो हमारे अपने हैदराबादी इतिहासकार हैं। उनकी अपने काम से ये उम्मीद है कि वो इतिहास को हैदराबादी कहानियों से आबाद करें, जो नहीं बताया गया है या नज़रअंदाज किया गया है उस पर रोशनी डालें। वो यह सब गोलकुंडा, निज़ाम और पोस्ट पार्टीशन हैदराबादी कहानियों के ज़रिए करते हैं। आज हम क्वेयरनेस की बात करेंगे। क्वेयरनेस के लिए मेरे पास लफ्ज़ नहीं है, अगर आपको पता है तो कमेंट्स में लिखिए। ये जहन में रखना है कि आज जिससे हम गुफ्तगू कर रहे हैं वो रोज़ाना की बुनियाद पे ही नहीं करते। वो क्वेयरनेस की नज़र से इतिहास को नहीं देखते, तो वो हमें जानी गई खुली हुई कहानियाँ बताएंगे क्वेयरनेस के बारे में। वो जेंडर आइडेंटिटी और हिजरा कम्युनिटी के बारे में बात करेंगे। ये कैसे मौजूद है हैदराबाद में और इनका इतिहास क्या है हैदराबाद में, इससे हमें रूबरू करेंगे। इस वक्त हिजरा कम्युनिटी के लोगों को यूनुक के नाम से जाना जाता था। ये ध्यान में रखें कि ये लफ्ज़ अब इस्तेमाल नहीं होता, लेकिन बतौर तारीख दान के आप ये लफ्ज़ इस गुफ्तगू में सुनेंगे। क्वेयरनेस खुद को पहचानने का या खुद को जानने का एक अलग तरीका है। आमतौर पर ये माना जाता है कि हम मर्द या औरत की तरह पैदा होते हैं और मर्द और औरत के बीच एक संबंधी रिश्ता होता है, लेकिन ये होना ज़रूरी नहीं है। ये काफ़ी कुदरती है कि हम अपने आप की पहचान, अपने जिनसियत की पहचान, सेक्सुअलिटी की पहचान या अपने लिंग, सिन्फ या जेंडर की पहचान खुद से करें। पॉज एक मेंटल हेल्थ यानी दिमागी सेहत की जगह है जो क्वेयर अफर्मेटिव है। आज सिर्फ एक छोटी सी बातचीत है जो रास्ता देगी और कहानियों को। हमें दूसरों से भी सुनना है कि अगर आपको कोई क्वेयर इतिहास की कहानियाँ पता है तो हमें ज़रूर बताइएगा। लेकिन अभी चलिए सुनते हैं यूनुस को, जो हमें समझाने की कोशिश करेंगे कि तारीख़ में क्वेयरनेस कैसे मौजूद है और इसकी कबूलियत के लिए क्या गुंजाइश है।
हेलो एवरीबॉडी, मैं रूही हूँ। वेलकम टू हैदराबादी पॉडकास्ट। आज मेरे साथ यूनुस लसानिया और निदा मीर है। इन दोनों के बारे में ब्रीफली बात करूंगी थोड़ी देर में, बट इंटेंशन, हमारा इरादा ये हैदराबादी पॉडकास्ट से ये है कि हम अपनी दक्कनी लैंग्वेज में, हिंदी लैंग्वेज में या फिर दक्कनी लैंग्वेज में मेंटल हेल्थ के बारे में या फिर जो भी टर्म्स है उसके अराउंड वो फेमिलियर कैसे होना, लोग उससे लोग कैसे डिटेल में जान सके हमारी ओन लैंग्वेज में, वो इरादा है हमारा। उसी इरादे के साथ आज ये दोनों मेरे साथ है। आज हम क्वेयरनेस के बारे में बात करेंगे। LGBTQIA+ जो टर्म है, जो बहुत ज्यादा सुनाई देता है आजकल अपने को। यहाँ हमारा इरादा ये है कि हम ब्रीफली इन चीज के बारे में बात करें और अपने हैदराबाद में, अपने दक्कनी लैंग्वेज में इस चीज के बारे में क्या चर्चा चल रही है या फिर लोग को क्या पता है, क्या नहीं पता है। सो ये ब्रीफ इंट्रोडक्शन कॉन्वर्सेशन रहेगा जहाँ पे ये दोनों हमें हेल्प करेंगे ये टर्म्स को समझने के लिए। और यूनुस हमारे साथ इसलिए आज है कि मैं लिटिल बिट यूनुस के बारे में इंट्रोडक्शन दूंगी कि यूनुस 9 साल से रिपोर्टिंग कर रहे हैं और वो एक जर्नलिस्ट भी है। और आप सबको शायद थोड़े ऑडियंस को पता है कि ये हेरिटेज वॉक्स भी करते हैं, जो हैदराबाद हिस्ट्री प्रोजेक्ट का एक पार्ट है। अभी मेरे को ये भी सुनाई दिया कि यूनुस बुक भी लिख रहे हैं, तो हम उस बारे में यूनुस से बात करेंगे। यूनुस, आप थोड़ा
हाँ,
इंट्रोडक्शन
थैंक यू फॉर द इंट्रोडक्शन। जो आप जो बोले बस वैसे ही है। मैं बुक लिख रहा हूँ। बुक जो है पुलिस एक्शन के ऊपर है। बेसिकली वो एक ओरल हिस्ट्री अकाउंट है, जो लोग जो हैदराबाद में 1948 में जिंदा थे, तो लास्ट 4-5 साल से उन लोगों को इंटरव्यू कर रहा था। तो अब जो है फिलहाल बुक खत्म होने पे आ गया, इंटरव्यूज भी हो गए, बस बुक लिखना है। तो बस दैट इज द बुक अबाउट। और उसके अलावा जैसा आप बोले, फिलहाल आई वर्क फॉर सियासत english.com। सियासत उर्दू पेपर है, जिस फॉर whoever is not aware, but I work for the English paper। हाँ, उसके अलावा वो हेरिटेज बॉक्स तो बस हर हफ्ते 2 बार चलते ही रहते, कैसे भी वो एक तरीके का आउटरीच है लोगों को सिखाने के लिए हिस्ट्री के बारे में, बस वो एक चीज है।
और आपका एक पॉडकास्ट भी है।
आप सॉरी यस हाँ, पॉडकास्ट है बियॉन्ड चार मीनार, उस पे भी काफी कुछ इन्फॉर्मेशन है एक्चुअली। उस पे इनफैक्ट बहुत सारा इन्फॉर्मेशन है। सपोज किसी को भी सीखना है बेसिक्स सिटी के बारे में, या सपोज किसी को अंडरस्टैंड करना है कि सिटी में क्या है क्या नहीं है, तो उस पे उन लोग जाकर देख सकते हैं, सॉरी सुन सकते हैं, माय बैड।
ब्रिलियंट, इंटरेस्टिंग लग रहा है। मेरे को आज ही पता चला वो पॉडकास्ट के बारे में, मैं जाके सुनूंगी इस सेशन के बाद। या सो थैंक यू यूनुस फॉर टेकिंग टाइम आउट और यहाँ पे रहने के लिए। आज संडे है और आपके वॉक्स भी संडे शायद होते हैं, और वो उससे टाइम लेकर के आप यहाँ पे आए। थैंक यू सो मच। आई हैव निदा विथ मी। सो निदा हमारे साइकोथेरेपिस्ट है पॉजिटिव पर्सपेक्टिव टीम पे, और सोशल मीडिया लीड भी है। सो आज मेरे पास थोड़े क्वेश्चंस हैं जो मैं लाइन अप करी हमारे कॉन्वर्सेशन से। तो थेरेपिस्ट बैठ के बात कर रहे थे पीएफपी पे, तो थोड़े क्वेश्चंस आए। वो क्वेश्चंस मैं पूछूंगी आप दोनों से, तो आप पॉपकॉर्न स्टाइल में दोनों भी जवाब दे सकते हैं इस बारे में। सो स्टार्ट करते हैं हम टॉपिक इस सेशन का, जो क्वेयरनेस है। सो इसका इंट्रोडक्शन जब हम क्वेयरनेस के बारे में बोलेंगे लोग को, लोकल्स को, तो जिसके के पास बैकग्राउंड नहीं है इन टर्म के बारे में, ये टर्म बहुत ज्यादा अभी अभी दिखाए, लाइक लोग एक्टिवली बात कर रहे हैं इस बारे में। सो अगर हम लोकल्स को ये टर्म के बारे में समझाए, तो आप लोग कैसे समझाओगे?
अब जो है देखिए, एक प्रॉब्लम तो है कि हैदराबाद में जनरली स्पीकिंग सिर्फ अब अपना शहर जो भी है एट द एंड ऑफ द डे बहुत पेट्रियार्कल है। उसका कुछ अब फॉर एग्जांपल अगर मेरे हेरिटेज वॉक्स पे भी अगर सपोज फॉर एग्जांपल, ओके आई गिव यू बेस्ट एग्जांपल, जो नामपल्ली एरिया है, नामपल्ली द जो आदमी नॉट आदमी सॉरी द पर्सन हु हु इट इज नेम्ड आफ्टर, नामपल्ली जो है नेक नाम खान के का जागीर था। नेक नाम खान was a transgender commander under the गोलकोंडा एम्पायर। सो नेकनाम खान मतलब, हाँ नेकनाम खान जो था उसका उनका अभी भी उनका एक लेक भी है गोलकोंडा फोर्ट के पास। सो उससे वी नो फॉर अ फैक्ट दैट के नेकनाम खान वाज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट पर्सन, के उनके पास काफी कुछ इन्फ्लुएंस था एक टाइम पे 1670s के आसपास। एंड क्लियरली उसको ट्रांसजेंडर थे या क्या थे, ज्यादा कुछ उससे फर्क नहीं पड़ा रिगार्डलेस ऑफ व्हाट ही वाज। उससे वी नो फॉर अ फैक्ट दैट एटलीस्ट हैदराबाद, सो हैदराबाद का जो हिस्ट्री है आई लाइक टू ब्रेक इट इनटू थ्री पार्ट्स। दैट इज द फर्स्ट जो है गोलकोंडा हिस्ट्री है, जो फाउंडेशनल हिस्ट्री है, जो हैदराबाद कैसे बना, क्या बना, कौन बनाए। सेकंड जो है निज़ाम हिस्ट्री है, निज़ाम जो गोलकोंडा के बाद आए 1724 से लेके 1948 तक के जो है निज़ाम और आसफ जाही पीरियड है। थर्ड इज व्हाट आई वुड से अपना जो मॉडर्न फिलहाल पोस्ट पोस्ट पार्टीशन पीरियड है। सो गोलकोंडा पीरियड में इफ यू लुक एट हिस्ट्री, वहां पर वी सी दैट क्वेयरनेस इन दैट सेंस वाज नेवर रियली किसी को कुछ बोल दो, इट वाज वेरी नॉर्मल, लाइक इन द सेंस दैट वहां पर इट इज नॉट समथिंग के अरे दैट पर्सन वाज अ ट्रांसजेंडर और ही वाज क्या बोलते, as far as I see it, queerness was pretty much accepted in the Golconda during the Golconda period without any kind of hindrance.
Really?
So, yeah, I mean, as far as I see it, I don't really see any issue that I have been able to figure out, especially see in the Mughal Empire, for example. Of course, you have this whole system where the harems would be taken care of by preferably a transgender person, or is what is the word for that? The eunuch, right? So the idea is that a eunuch would not, I guess, misuse their position. That sense. So you have this eunuchs in that sense. I'm talking about the medieval period, were pretty much more or less people with influence, because they were in that particular position, that because they were the protector of the harems also. So queerness, as far as I see it, but the thing is, there's also a level of there are different, I would say a different scale of who, what, of the kind of person. For example, a person in charge of the harem would be completely different from, say, another person who might be a poet and who might be in love with a person of the same sex. For example, गोलकोंडा के जो किंग्स है क्वींस में, उनमें तो I have not really seen any hints of queerness, maybe at least not outwardly. But then, for example, you look at Babur. Babur was a contemporary of the founding king of the Golconda Empire, a man named Sultan Ali. Babur is somebody who has written his Baburnama mein he writes about being in love with a 17-year-old boy. Okay, so with that, I'm not saying that Babur was like he was gay. It's entirely possible he was bisexual. So you know, there are instances where you find, for example, I believe there is another person in Hyderabad history. His name is Malik Yakut. Apparently, he's also believed to be a transgender. Again, not sure entirely, but so Nek Naam Khan ko to pakka hai. Nek Naam Khan was definitely a transgender commander, and Nek Naam Khan's position was pretty strong. And the interesting part is that Nek Naam Khan is actually buried, and him, I mean, उसका जो मकबरा है वो इब्राहिम कुतुब शाह के ग्रेव पे है. इब्राहिम कुतुब शाह was the third Golconda king. So Nek Naam Khan, have you both been to Qutub Shahi tombs?
Yeah, that's fun.
Qutub Shahi tombs is a place जहाँ पर only the royalty is buried along with anybody of equal importance. So there are hundreds of tombs of random people, including soldiers, barbers, commander. किस किस की टूमा है वहाँ पर, लेकिन the fact that नेक नाम खान का specific tomb एक king के tomb के ऊपर है, मतलब he was very important. Okay,
तो यूनुस, आप जब ये हिस्ट्री वॉक्स करते हैं ना, आप जब इंट्रोड्यूस करते these historical figures, do you also mention, मतलब उन लोग का आइडेंटिटी भी मेंशन करते क्या?
Yeah, I do mention that they were. There's no point of not mentioning the identity, right? And as far as जहाँ तक मेरे को समझ में आया, nobody has ever. Mostly people are surprised. Some people थोड़े लोग बोलते हैं अरे सही में ऐसा है क्या? बोला है, मैं थोड़ी बोल रहा हूँ, लिखा हुआ जो है वही है वो. So also there is, see, the general idea, I think अपने शहर में जो है, especially with terms of history, like there is a split between what we know as queerness today versus, I think that terminology अपने, for example, parents के generation में नहीं है. For them queerness only is restricted to being a eunuch, or hijra is the word that they use. So the funny thing is, like for example, even in my father runs a business in his shop, so in the area, it's not like they have a problem with transgenders. They don't really have an issue per se, nor do they shun them. In fact, it's some very weird kind of societal thing that they have, where they believe that if they keep them properly and feed them and treat them properly, you will get good luck. So I'm not sure how that emerged. But for example, about history also, like apart from what do you call Nek Naam Khan, there is also something very interesting I found. While trying to find different places. शादाब होटल तो मालूम ना आपको? So शादाब होटल के सामने, so do you know what an Ashur Khana is?
Yeah.
So where Shia Muslims observe Muharram, right? So Shadab Hotel के पीछे there is this Hyderabad's oldest Ashur Khana called the Badshah Ashur Khana. But थोड़ा आगे, on the opposite side of Shadab, when you go like maybe about 50 meters ahead, on the left hand side, you find something called Hirdonka Haveli. Okay, that was basically, it's a 400-year-old Haveli that was given, and I believe it's happened by one Nawab under the Nizams. I'm not remembering his name. There's like a very long history to this. At least 150-200 साल पुराना तो है ही. That place, that Haveli, was given to the eunuchs or hijras by one particular Nawab, and they've been staying there. And they every Muharram they take out their own alam for Muharram. It's called Hijron ka Alawa बोल के. Like beside the Haveli, there is actually one Muharram shrine of the eunuchs living there only. And that is something that they've been doing since forever, and everybody goes there to pray.
Yeah.
So it's like, so even within the regular norm, like whatever normal communities, whatever you want to say, even the transgender community has its own place. Okay, but it is very restricted to the conventional idea of what a transgender person is, and not to say queerness. So that it's a person, an ordinary person in Hyderabad will have zero issues with, say, a transgender or a eunuch, technically speaking, of what they know. Like in their brains, hijra or eunuch is what they know. But if you tell them a person is, say, a person's sexual orientation is lesbian or gay, they might have more issues with that than with, let's say, a transgender person who they are familiar with. So
Right.
historically speaking, यहाँ पर लोग जो है used to है, like मुहर्रम के processions में, regular जो भी city के जो बड़े बड़े processions होते हैं, अगर आप even if you go to temples, you will see transgender people going there without any problem.
You
So
know, मेरे को जब मैं सुन रही हूँ आपको and I'm thinking के जो eunuchs है ना, they were, I think there was some political base when they were kept in courts, royal courts,
right.
you know, as caretakers of. So, and now also sexuality and identity is very political, but it also sounds like कि ऐसा डिवाइड कर दिए कि आप ट्रांसजेंडर है तो आप अपनी कम्युनिटी में रहो, हम अपनी कम्युनिटी में रहते हैं ना. देयर इज सम सॉर्ट ऑफ डिविजन दैट हैज हैपेंड एंड देन आई वंडर कि आपका जो like in the modern terms, then how do we include transgender people, how do we include people with different identity and sexualities? Or agar aap bol rahe ki there is problem with, you know, sexuality being either homosexual or bisexual or anything like that, और उससे ज़्यादा प्रॉब्लम है क्योंकि ट्रांसजेंडर्स आर सो, इफ आई मे से, कॉमन थ्रू हिस्ट्री, राइट, कि देखा गया है, एक्सेप्ट करा गया है. There are people who have been transgender, people know of, right? But with sexuality, there's still a little bit of stigma. Then how do we then ऐसा डिवाइड नहीं करना, जैसे कि अब अलग से बना दिए कम्युनिटी. ऑफ कोर्स जब के टाइम पे शायद बिकॉज क्योंकि ये मार्जिनलाइज आइडेंटिटीज है, इट्स गुड दैट देयर इज लाइक अ कम्युनिटी एंड लाइक अ बेस फॉर दैट, राइट? बट देन उसके अलावा डिविजन भी हो रहा, तो हम लोग इंक्लूड कैसा करना? With keeping history in mind, like how do we then include people of different identities and sexualities?
See, the thing is, I would say अभी शायद थोड़ा सा awareness है. I would not say too much. Maybe अपने generation के लोगों में थोड़ा सा कुछ change expect कर सकते हैं शायद. But अभी भी, for example, see, I'll tell you the best example within Muslims especially. Now, given जो भी हो रहा अभी इंडिया में, बहुत सारा trauma है, especially for people of this generation, because it's like continuous violence every day, something or other is happening. But then कभी-कभी अब suddenly उसके बीच में, for example, जब Pride March होता, you will see that a lot of the homophobia or a lot of the attacks on the LGBTQ community comes from Muslims also. Okay, who say who and this is what I keep telling my Muslim friends, like, boss, you are all seeking some kind of justice from the majoritarian crowd, saying that we are minorities and we are getting attacked. Like, how are you okay with discriminating against a much smaller minority group within society, within yours? Like, you can't actually, it's very unfair to say that we are a minority and then do the same thing to somebody else, right? It does not really get into their head that they are summarizing one entire or section of people simply
Correct.
because of sexual orientation, and for them it is religiously ordained. So ये garbage है. So it's like some of them say, हाँ, हमको problem नहीं है कि suppose somebody is gay or suppose somebody is lesbian or whatever, but they'll say, but we can't accept them. I'm saying you don't have to accept them. Just let them live. So it's a very it's a very weird mix of religious and culture. But then again, if you look back at Hyderabad history, like for example, Nek Naam Khan or even the Hijron ka Haveli, you will actually see that in that area, in that Shadab ka area mein, people actually respect all the eunuchs who live there. They actually don't disturb them, nor do they have any kind of weird or ill feeling. Like they actually interact with them very normally. And because I know that because my a social worker who I know took me there, and I thought maybe thoda sa kuch, it's like you need to know that person on a very private basis to actually enter their haveli, but nothing like that. They were pretty welcoming. In fact, just randomly knocked on the door and said, hey, यहाँ पर मेरे साथ journalist है, he wants to talk to you. हाँ ठीक है, अंदर आओ बोल के, that's it. Like there's nothing else beyond that. Also, I believe it might also be with the fact that the eunuchs there in Hirudon ki Haveli also are Muslims. So probably maybe it is a little easier for them to assimilate in that particular area. Maybe if they were Hindus, it might have been easier for them to maybe be close to temple. I'm not sure. But generally speaking, I don't think there is any. There is, of course, there is stigma for eunuchs, especially for in how they're treated, how they live, etc., etc. But I think in terms of social interaction, it's just there is acceptance, but on a different level. It's not the same acceptance that you would say we could easily see somebody accepting a member of the LGBTQ community. It's like it has to be in a certain way. Historically, that's how it has been. So, लोगों को भी वही, like especially people who are from the older generations, they won't get LGBTQ. For them, eunuchs are as far as they'll accept.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's a good point that you brought up ना कि आप खुद minority है तो फिर आप minorities के against कैसा oppression कर रहे हैं
हाँ, I mean थोड़ा
और
सा हार्ड है एक्सप्लेन कराने को. अब उनको कैसा एक्सप्लेन कराऊं वो मेरे को भी समझ में नहीं आता. बिकॉज फॉर देम इट इज लाइक हमारे को क्या है रिलीजियस that we are getting attacked based on religion, but for them it's like these people are different. It is based on, it's not based on religion. This is like they are different people. I'm like it's very hard to explain for people, on that level. Like, see, religiosity is just a very common thing now. So for them, it's very, it's like I don't think there is any kind of even basic understanding of general sexuality, I would say, because I grew up in the same thing, right? नहीं है. Historically also नहीं है. I mean, history books में तो there is almost zero, no mention. What we have are mentions of people of different sexualities or different orientation in some places where authors have not held back. See, for example, very different books also. It's not like all of the books on Hyderabad history will talk about, say, Nek Naam Khan or anything else. Only few of them will talk about it. And a lot of the books also tend to whitewash the LGBTQ or queerness from characters sometimes. तो वो भी होता बार बार.
प्रॉब्लम ये नहीं है कि था ही नहीं हिस्ट्री में, प्रॉब्लम ये है कि इनविजिबलाइज हो गया जो था, वो भी किसी ने बात नहीं की उसके बारे में, है ना. एंड व्हेन वी कम टू लाइक the Muslim community and the backlash that LGBTQI community experience from them, of course religious grounds है, but then जो common है दोनों के बीच में is the human ground, कि आपको मालूम है what oppression is, you know what trauma is, right? Like,
Exactly.
तो आप खुद दूसरी कम्युनिटी पे ऐसा कैसा कर, ठीक है आपका कोई religious sentiments and religious values है which are like asking you not to believe in something, but you cannot deny something ना, कि अगर मैं आपको आके बोलूं कि आप मुस्लिम नहीं है तो like you'll get offended.
Exactly, मैं कभी भी यही बोलता हूँ. But then the moment you say that, if I tell you that, I mean that's exactly what is happening to Muslims, where these Hindutva guys are saying that you are not Muslim, your ancestors are Hindu.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm like, if that's what I tell them. I'm like, what if someone comes and says you can't be Muslim, you have to be something, or that you are not Muslim just because your ancestors converted doesn't mean that you're Muslim now. Something like that, like. So, but if you raise that point, people take it in a very different way. So it's like the moment you say something like that, they're like, ye to, what is the word for that? Murtad, I think, a non-believer. That is the word that's constantly thrown at me on Twitter. आ गया मुर्ताद.
Kafir बोलते. I've received kafir and all of that. Like there's a lot of backlash.
Kafir just means, no, it's like pretty normal. But then again, of course, both of them are problematic. But my point is that ये अभी हो गया. It's like you have to function within the realm of what they understand. Otherwise, नहीं तो समझ में नहीं आता. I guess थोड़ा सा, if you look at the progressive.
You know some one thing. No, continue.
No, I was just going to say that if you look at the progressive writers' history, then I think if you see Ismat Chugtai, she wrote that article. What was the story? Lihaf, the quilt. She writes about a woman having क्या बोलते हैं, sexual I think it's a lesbian. She writes about one girl who ends up working for a very rich person, and then both of them like kind of have a they get attracted to each other. So you have within modern post-independent literature also, you do have queerness written very visibly. But then again, for example, when people talk about Ismat Chugtai, no one talks about that. They only talk to, it's like the same thing. For example, like in Hyderabad, apne paas, you have somebody called Makhdoom Mohyuddin, who is a very well-known Urdu poet. But more than being an Urdu poet, is actually a communist leader who gathered trade unions. So when Muslims today talk about Makhdoom, they don't want to talk about his communist background. They only want to talk about his Urdu literature only. They don't want people to know that he was actually an anti-Nizam communist. That's today unthinkable, but back then it was pretty common. So that kind of same thing applies here also. Maybe people that Hironka Haveli was just fascinating to me because I was like, it is right there in the middle of the main street where everybody goes, and during Muharram, everyone goes there to pray. It's not like it's a Muharram shrine only for Hyderabad. It's there for everybody. That shrine travels to all different parts of the old city and then comes back. So it's there. Now again, how much or how that applies to the other LGBTQ members, even I am not sure. So that.
It's fascinating what we both are talking. It seems like there's a lot of history just in the space that we live in. And also, I'm just wondering, जब आप दोनों बात कर रहे थे, मैं because you said that you get across these people and also in your own friend circle, right? When you're talking to straight Muslim people and versus like your folks, right? How do you, because I'm sitting with, because I'm a straight Muslim woman, right? I'm sitting with this idea to sort of look at then how do we sort of hold space like for the community, right? Who are in the spaces struggling to get a deeper sense of that idea of religion versus identity, right? So I'm wondering if you both have any points about, because how I see it as, because people come into therapy talking about Muslim female therapist chahiye. Kyun chahiye? Then when we unpack this queerness that's coming up. And there is this, I had instances in my therapy space where people aake Quran ki ayat nikal ke bole ye aap aise ho, then there's shaming in front in the space, right? Then of course, as a therapist who is straight and who's visible to be in that space, right? So मैं ये सोच रही थी कि how do you respectfully hold space for people who you interact with, be it like your straight people or be it queer folks or be it anybody out there, like what's the respectful language around holding space, right?
That's actually something that even I am kind of, I'm always thinking about what language to use while addressing people. Honestly speaking, I don't think that anybody has actually been able to come up with some, what do you call, how, क्या बोल सकते हैं उसको? For example, I'm supposed to talking to somebody in Urdu also. You just use the word, no. Sometimes you also tend to get confused if it's a transgender person. क्या बोलना उनको बोल के, right? So I don't know. I'm not sure. I just sometimes go with I best thing is to just ask. That's what I always do.
Yeah, because like for me, it comes from a place of really looking at a person from a humanness ground than putting them in the boxes of saying ki, like gender and identity, right? Because it's best to sort of, like as you said, ki pooch lo. Confusion hai to pooch lo than sitting and just mispronouncing or misgendering and things like that. So yeah, that's brilliant. Like pooch lena.
That is what I do, because उसके अलावा मेरे दिमाग में तो और कुछ भी नहीं आता, because अब again वही है ना, आप कुछ गलती से कुछ दूसरा बोल दिए तो फिर उनको फिर you can't really, you will end up offending them at the end of the day. So best not to see. Even at my walks also, when I use the word transgender, sometimes people do give me looks like अरे क्या बोल रहा है कि बोल के, but then but there is actually no counter to the things I say, because it's something that people who are non-queer people also need to understand that just you how you end up disrespecting a person sometimes is very normal, like it's very normalized.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I'm not sure of what terminology to like. I always ask because I don't think ऐसा कुछ है भी अभी तक फिलहाल. I don't think,
Definitely.
especially in cities like Hyderabad, where you not just have to understand because even somebody, let's say, who is gay, who will have a lot more agency. Of course, now see this here is the interesting part about people. There are a lot of Muslim men who, I think there's a category called MQ men who have sex with men. Like these are men who will also have a functioning daily life, wife and children, but at the same time they roam around with other boys, and they do whatever they want on the side. And it might be that they're gay, it might be that they're bisexual. I know people, for example, somebody who is much older than me but who has boyfriends, and they basically spend their whole day together, and the guy, one of them, the married guy, just goes back to his house in the evening and he has a child. uh, I think within Muslim spaces it is very difficult, and many of the people I know, for example, especially men, uh, it's very difficult. I don't think women are even at a stage where, from my own experience at least, because see, it's already very patriarchal, right? So at least men have the agency to do what they want. I don't know what will happen to a woman who comes out in a Hyderabadi Muslim family. Uh, क्या करते शादी करा देते हैं at the end of the day. But for as far as men are concerned, you will see them living their life essentially. So, but you will never see them completely breaking out of the regular societal structure. They will still maintain a facade of something, and they will still be wanting to be identified as straight men only. Of course, not everybody. I'm talking about like the typical conventional groups, like especially people from the lower middle class strata, because unlike say somebody like me or somebody else who has access and means and privilege to get a good job, move out of the house, do something, these people don't have any support system. So they're still required to stay on that particular social strand because they need their friends, they need. And many of them, I have so many Muslim friends who all like had relationships or hooked up when they were in school, college. So not school, I'm talking about 17, 18 years. They've all, had boyfriends. So I don't know, honestly, like men are a completely different game compared to say a woman. Uh, Within this whole problem, men seemingly have a much easier life than compared to anybody else.
There are layers of,
Uh,
oppression, stigma, and all of that that needs to be dismantled.
Also,
Perspective.
as far as men I've seen, जहाँ तक मैं देखा, कुछ भी हुआ बोले तो they'll just say ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं है. They basically end up, for example, there's one. Let's say there are two lovers, both are men, and one of them is unmarried. So the other guy is married with children. So even if people find out that something has happened, they'll probably say that the unmarried guy is just spoiling the other guy. So that.
That speaks so much about the power dynamics, and how much heteronormativity is, and this idea of marriage and all of that is so powerful कि तुम दूसरे इंसान को blame कर दे सकते, the one who's less like who has the less power in the time.
And it's a very common tactic I've seen. Like, in fact, a lot of, sadly, there's also groups which, I don't know if you've encountered this, they actually target gay men and also LGBTQ members. Like, basically, they go on dating apps and find them and then start threatening them with money, saying that I'll inform your family or something like that.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, so it's, see, somewhere like Bombay, Delhi, where people, it's a little bit more open. It's different. Hyderabad, like you said, the whole point of this is that people are still not even halfway there. In general, like I'm talking about conventional society families who are still very busy, not allowing Muslim girls to have even half the freedom that boys have. So that is वहाँ पर तो I think there's no scope even for negotiation in that sense.
Yeah.
So that, sadly.
So, two things that you said, is one about सिर्फ उनसे पूछ लेना आपको कैसे बुलाना है,
Oh.
एक तो वो है और एक तो just be respectful कि shaming and like disrespectful language has become so normalized, then थोड़ा बहुत अवेयरनेस की जरूरत है ना कि आप कैसे बात कर रहे हैं दूसरे इंसान से, इंसान ही है ना, लाइक जो भी है, to talk to them respectfully, to ask them कि what is the language that they prefer, है ना. Those are some good things to keep in mind when we are addressing somebody, anybody, even if they don't outwardly show as belonging to a particular.
So yeah, so I think, is there anything else I have to say? No, I think I pretty much said I made a few points. I think pretty much this is it. So if you, I think if you have any questions, आप पूछ लीजिए please.
I have a question, but I was thinking, as much you know about history of queerness, जो आप पढ़े, जो आपको मालूम है, and then if we were to create history, right? Like, what do you think are some of the learnings from the past that we can use, or what do you think we can do now to include, visualize, create history?
See, well, I guess एक दो चीज जो कर सकते हैं is to normalize acceptance. So you know, like, for example, I think the best example is with Yunus only. There's some kind of weird acceptance people have. I'm not even sure why. I think it is associated with some kind of superstition or something like that. But I think, yeah, I think the best thing is to just normalize acceptance, and that's, even if it's a small start, it is still a start at the end of the day. Because I don't think we are even at that stage yet. As of now.
And I guess it's also important to really be watchful of what you know and what you don't know, and safe to sort of really articulate and ask, right? पूछ लेना नहीं पता है तो, and
best is actually ask, I always would say.
Yeah.
Asking and also educating ourselves. So, like, we can't put the entire responsibility on the queer community to educate us, right? There needs to be some personal accountability where you go out and educate yourself. Right? To do that, to build a community that is more acceptable and inclusive of everybody rather than discriminating. The grounds to be humanitarian.
Exactly, and that's what I was getting to.
Hyderabad तो light हो गया.
यहाँ पर वो, I think अभी भी इतना दूर नहीं आया अभी. I think बहुत time बाकी है to even kind of वहाँ तक आने को भी.
जितना अपने को पता है, I guess that's the beginning of having to get ourselves more informed and also informing other people, like what you do with your friends and within your community, right? And it starts from that we need to, of course, creating a huge impact. But yeah, I guess it was really powerful having this conversation with you, Yunus, keeping us informed about the history. And of course, there was the community that you were talking about near that space is something that was not familiar at all. I guess it was not familiar for you also, Nita, but that's interesting that it's shown up that way. But yeah, thank you so much for being part of this conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so this was Yunus and Nida on Conversation with Queerness in the History of Hyderabad. So for more such informative education on Hyderabadi/English today, stay tuned to our social media platforms. And thank you so much. Take care and stay safe until next time. Bye.